Mark Borland. So he is our English literature component to the program. He got his doctorate in English at UCLA back many moons ago, 1988. I was in high school. I don't know if I should torment our speakers, making them feel old. I feel old myself, but taught at Emory from 1989 until 2018, except for the time that he spent doing important work for the National Endowment for the Arts. He's done lots of scholarly work, of course, but he's published in lots of popular periodicals like the Wall Street Journal, Weekly Standard, Washington Post, Times Literary, Chronicle of Higher Education. Of course, recently he's been working for First Things, and he has written The Dumbest Generation, How the Digital Age Stupefies Young Americans and Jeopardizes Our Future. And that's what he was writing a while ago. So, oh my goodness, if the dumbest generation was 20 years ago, what would, the dumbest generation so far, perhaps, but we can ask him what he thinks about our still younger generation. And recently co-edited a collection of essays, The State of the American Mind, 16 leading critics on the new anti-intellectualism, which is also another topic that can be updated, perhaps. But join me in welcoming Mark Borland.
Thank you. All right, is this on? This is on. Okay, great. Okay, very good. So today, just sort of a casual talk, looking at some important images in American history. And we talked a lot about American citizenship and ideas and principles and the civic religion of America. But let me focus instead on the American citizen, right? The person, what was sometimes called the national character. Or if you look at the third letter of Krepke's Letters of an American Farmer, what is an American? It's called, which the founders, George Washington, loved that book, as did the others. And when we're talking about the figure, okay, this is where we get into, as you saw from my title, the poetry of American citizenship, the art of American citizen, right? The power of an image. The songs, right? The architecture that goes along with the creed, right? And there's a lot of debate about the creedal basis of American citizenship. But I think it's very important, maybe as a curricular reminder, to include in these civic centers. We've got the political theory, political philosophy, we have the history, but also let's get the art of the civic art in there as well. And so let's just run through a few of the more common figures. This is one I'm going to jump ahead. You've probably seen this painting, right? This is 1872. I think it's not a large painting, actually. We're putting it out here. Here is, it goes under the name now, Manifest Destiny. That wasn't the original name of it, but you can see what's going on here. There is a historical process, right? The momentum is happening. Here's the timeline. As you go from right to left, you're moving forward through history. You see on the right, you can see there's New York City, far right. You can actually see a little bit of Brooklyn Bridge, which is just being started at this time. And as you go over here on the left, that's the continent before the Americans have come into play. And at each stage, you see, okay, you got see in the lower left-hand corner, you got that bear snarling, at those pioneers and hunters coming in. You've got the Indians above the buffalo being pushed out by the covered wagon, the settlers, right? You've got this figure here in the center, that's Columbia. You see what she's doing? She's stringing telegraph wires, right? Floating across the sky, the stagecoach, right? And then farming here, and the railroad, of course. This is American history, 1870, in process. You show this painting to some people, and they're appalled by it. Other people, they feel, all right, this is the growth of America. It's a very good debating issue, I think, to bring into your classrooms when you're talking about the historical situation, say, the War of the Plains Indians, as it was called back then. But it should be in your canon of images. We got a canon of books. Let's get a canon of civic images. Again, painting, artworks, and so on. Here is, right, another one. You all know this. This is Washington crossing the Delaware. And when you show these images, you want to pause, right? Let's do a little artistic, aesthetic breakdown. The composition, right, of the painting. Everything about this painting is designed to affirm the heroism of that guy, right? Not quite centered, right? A little off to the left. And you notice, okay, we're getting him in perfect profile, okay? We're looking at him to the side. And you can look at the arrangement of hue, right? We are moving from the dark over into the light. It's a famous event, right? Christmas, we're crossing the Delaware River. Over there, we're going to go then south down to Trenton, okay? And where the Hessian garrison is. Look at the posture, right, of Washington. That one leg is up on the bow, right? He's ready to step off and lead everyone. Everyone else is busy with the ice, the river, paddling, blocking from the wind blowing. Washington, he's unfazed. His eye is on the target, right? He's the leader. Everyone behind him, this long line of boats, he's going to be first, right? And you can even see when a painter makes a painting, where is he moving your eye, right? You go to this figure, leg up, and you see the line, it's almost parallel with heading up to the American flag. Right? And it wouldn't be as good if the flag was in front of him, right? Flag is behind him. And this is leadership. This is the father of our country. And this is again, to emphasize the heroism, right? This is idol worship of a very good kind. So this is another image to put into the canon. And one thing to remember about this image is the event. We see George Washington, a man of such probity, right? Strong moral figure. The founders didn't regard Washington as the smartest guy, the most educated, the most talented, but there was no question who the leader was. Washington has the leadership capacities. He's got the wisdom to lead others in this great experiment that is now underway. The thing to remember about what he's doing here is a risky, reckless, dicey, all or nothing act. If this doesn't work, it could be over, right? The history of the war, it's going very poorly for Washington and his army. This is almost a last chance. And what happened, it turned out, it was a fantastic victory. I mean, in sheer numbers, it wasn't that big, but it gave confidence back home with Congress. It gave confidence to the men. They got tons of supplies as well. A lot of them didn't have shoes. Well, now they had shoes because of all the ones who surrendered. But it goes to point out something that I want to add to this national character element, and that precisely is this line of American hero, American figure, American Idol, who is a little bit reckless, something of a renegade, willing to risk all on something. And remember, these are revolutionaries. They are violating the law of the land at the time. And so it's good to keep that side of Washington in mind. which is going to have several successors. Here's one as well. Right? You know what this is. Right? There's the Alamo. There's Davy Crockett in his Kentucky garb with his long rifle. Right? He's holding it up at this moment because they're out of ammunition. Yeah. Crockett, a month earlier, had gone back to Kentucky from Washington, D.C., where he was a congressman. Okay? I mean, I'm old enough to have grown up with Davy Crockett. Okay? There were TV shows. There were movies about Davy Crockett. Everyone knew about Davy Crockett. Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, the Western pioneers and pathfinders, scouts, Indian fighters, and Crockett was one of them. Crockett grows up again on the frontier as it was then. He was a great Indian fighter, killed a lot of people, saw a lot of his own people killed on the frontier. He's elected actually to Congress as the frontier is being settled. He goes to D.C. and does a 2-year term. And he actually gets voted out. He does two 2-year terms with a break. He voted out of the first one and the second one because, one, he opposed giving the widow of Robert Fulton, out of the steamship, he opposed the U.S. government giving her a pension on the grounds, this is a private individual. That's not what the government is for. Well, Fulton was very popular. River travel was growing in the 1830s, of course. And so they voted him out. They voted him back in, and he opposed then in that term the Cherokee removal. We saw about this yesterday. He actually opposed this vigorously. He said, don't do that. The great Indian fighter saying, don't do this. Well, that was, again, an unpopular take, so he gets voted out of office again. Now, the legend has it, I don't know if this is true, the legend has, he goes back to his home district. He gives a talk in the town square saying, well, I told the people of Kentucky that I would serve them well, and if they thought that I didn't do so and they voted out, well, then they could do so. And now they can go to hell, and I'm going to Texas. Okay? That's the line. They can go to hell, and I'm going to Texas. So he took about 35 or so of his men. Now, if you went to Texas, you did so on the promise of land. Right? You come and fight for Texas independence, not the United States. They're not going to be part of the U.S. Lone Star State. You fight for Texas independence, and you'll get property when you win. So they go to the Alamo. You know what? I was my son's girlfriend last year. We're at dinner, and I mentioned the Alamo. She's 20 years old. She grew up in New Jersey. I mentioned the Alamo. She'd never heard of it. Okay, that shows. And she's a smart girl. Smart. She's engineering major, very very bright, but hadn't ever heard of the Alamo before. So it's a shunned topic now, right? For stupid reasons. But actually, they get there to the Alamo. There are about 150 men there. Santa Anna shows up with 4,000 men. They did not expect nearly that size of an army to approach. And Santa Anna says, surrender or you're put to the sword. And the leader, Colonel Travis, summons the men and says, here's the deal. Only one, if anyone wants to leave, go now. And one guy left, He made his way through the lines and got away. Well, Santa Anna men, they start digging trenches around the Alamo. They didn't realize these guys, Davy Crockett with the long rifles, pew, pew, they started picking them off. Said, move it back, we're too close. They killed some of the soldiers digging trenches there. Well, the attack comes, it happens, and it only lasts a few hours. Another renegade type figure, Jim Bowie, is there, the inventor of the Bowie knife. It's a frightening instrument, but it's very common on the frontier. He was ill, and so he was actually in sick bay. And before the attack, he had them prop him up in bed with 2 6-shooters. Killed several, and then they came in and bayoneted him to death. Crockett's run out of ammunition here, and so about 6 of them surrendered. Last one's alive. And they've got them, and Santa Anna, and this is actually recorded in one of Santa Anna's officers, who hated Santa Anna, who did a diary of the campaign, not only of the Alamo, but of the Goliad massacre, which happened a few weeks later, which actually turned American opinion solidly against Mexico. You can look up the Goliad massacre and see what that was. Walt Whitman has a section of Song of Myself devoted to the Goliad massacre. Anyway, Santa Anna rode up with his men and said, "What are these men doing here alive?" And they said, "We don't want to kill them." They fought valiantly. Santa Anna looks toward his men, and they went and just bayoneted all of them, instantly to death. But this is Davy Crockett. That's the hero. You don't go to hell. I'm going to Texas. Battle, fight, Indian fighter. This is another American hero. And, there are, if you think about how many of these American figures who are somewhat outlaw or outside the law somehow, they are orphans or runaways, right? Remember Ben Franklin? We've heard a few times about Franklin. Franklin's a runaway. He's broken the law when he leaves Boston. He's got to work up a scheme to get away from his indentured servitude to his brother. Andrew Jackson, another figure. He fights duels. He kills people. Okay? I've got a bunch of them. We've got John Adams. Then there's Sam Adams, right? The Boston Tea Party. Let's go trash the place. Okay? But he's a hero. Huck Finn, of course, right? Huck doesn't want to be civilized. We heard yesterday also those final lines. I got to light out for the territory. The widow, she's going to civilize me, and I can't stand it. I've been there before. Right? Not Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn. Gatsby. Jay Gatsby is a runaway. Jimmy Gatz in his youth. And we see him as a romantic dreamer. He's also a cheap bootlegger who hangs around with New York hoodlums, okay? And Gatsby, he is both, right? And there are other figures. Hester Prynne. Hester Prynne is a rebellious temperament, right? In the Scarlet Letter. These are figures who are just a little unruly, right? They're hard to control. They're Americans. Okay? It was very important to the Founding Fathers to be thought civilized. Why? Because for Europeans, the word barbarian and American were synonymous. Who would go to America except, criminals in Georgia, penal colony, right? People running away from something. My wife's great-great-grandfather, he came here Irish in the 1840s. He came because he was a disgrace to his family. He was a second or third son. He didn't want to become a priest. He got in some trouble. Get on a ship, head over to... That's a typical, American emigre at the time. These were not the high parts of society, right? William Penn, I wasn't going to talk about this. It just occurs to me. William Penn, Pennsylvania, is settled because William Penn, Sr., who is Charles II Secretary of War, Secretary of the Navy, he was Secretary of the Navy, said, my son, he's fallen in with these crazy, Quaker, whatever they are. Just ship him give him some land over there in the New World and just ship him off, get him out of here. That's an American story right there. So we have to take into account the rougher side of the American figure, the American character. Here's, okay, see that American, who doesn't, actually, everyone recognizes this image. This is one of the major counterculture works. It might have been 1970. I was going to say the 60s, but it might have come out in 1970. Easy Rider. Easy Rider. 2 guys on motorcycles. They do a big drug deal in Los Angeles. They got a lot of money. They take a trip across America. They end up in New Orleans. Okay, and it's a travel log, right? In reverse, not heading west. They're heading back east, but they're going through the West. They're like On the Road, Jack Kerouac, same kind of American story right there of these offbeat characters going across the land, experiencing America here and here. Remember, Huck is breaking the law. Huck is on this journey. It's a classic journey motif to structure that episodic plot, but Huck's doing the wrong thing legally. And even Huck feels his conscience telling him, you're doing the wrong thing, but this other side of the conscience says, no, Jim is a good guy. You love Jim. Who's the guy in white wearing the football helmet? Who is that? Who's the actor? Jack Nicholson. This is the movie that made Jack Nicholson a star. He's in it for about 10 minutes. He totally steals the show from Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda. Okay? Peter Fonda is the guy wearing the American flag motorcycle helmet. He's got an American flag on his gas tank. I said to a French person, we were talking about this movie, and she said, oh, those guys are totally American to us. Yeah, they're countercultural, but that's part of the American way. Okay? I'm going to show a clip from that at the end. All right, so this kind of other side, right? A little bit rough, a little bit, outside convention. And we're going to look at a few more. Here is how it can operate, even in figures that are taken as canonical. This is one of the famous images of the 19th century of a figure who actually was one of the most photographed human beings in America. There are dozens of photographs of Walt Whitman. Okay, this isn't a photograph. This is actually the frontispiece of the 1855 edition of Leaves of Grass, the first edition of Leaves of Grass, which Whitman published largely himself. He worked as a printer before this. He's 36 years old at this time. And he published 500 copies. He mails it out to people, including to Emerson. That was the big breakthrough, because Emerson liked it. But this is the frontispiece. Okay? Now, a poet in America is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who is a professor at Harvard, who's done actually a major translation of Dante, among other things, writing his poetry. He is genteel, right? He's a Harvard, Cambridge, lovely house. You can go to the Longfellow Museum in Cambridge today. John Greenleaf Whittier, right? This gentleman figure, okay? Ralph Waldo Emerson, the sage of Concord. People travel to Concord to see the great Emerson. This is Whitman. Okay? Just a picture on the frontispiece, and he's just wearing work clothes. An ordinary workman with this nonchalant pose. Whitman loves the word nonchalant. With his hat, at an angle. This is not a gentleman figure. Okay? Again, just working class kind of guy. And if you then turn the page, you get the title page. Leaves of Grass. You see what's missing? No name, no author. He just showed the picture. You're not even quite sure what it is, right? This is the copyright page following the title page, and it's a full page. I blew it up a little bit. It's tiny script because it's legally. Someone has to copyright this book, and it just says copyright by Walter Whitman. Okay, have you ever heard anyone call him Walter Whitman? No, because that's not him. This is not the figure he wants to represent in the poem, in the book. So just copyright Walter Whitman. And then, what do we get? I'm sorry for the small clip, but I wanted to show you the whole page. You turn the page, and then you get this blob of prose. No title. This is now called the preface to Leaves of Grass. Okay? And if you read it, you can see there's no argument here. This is all just rambling prose poetry taking place in Whitman. And I just want to point out a couple of lines. I know you probably, I don't know if you can read them or not, but the opening line, America does not repel the past or what it has produced under its forms amid other powder. If you jump down, next paragraph, the Americans of all nations at any time upon the earth have probably the fullest poetical nature. The Americans, all of them, as a group. If you jump down about 4 sentences, you can see there's an ellipsis in the first column on the right, just before the ellipsis. Here is the hospitality which forever indicates heroes. Here are the roughs and beards, and Whitman has a beard, and space and ruggedness and nonchalance that the soul loves. Here the performance disdaining the trivial unapproached in the tremendous audacity of its crowds and groupings. Next paragraph near the bottom, the genius of the United States, and then at the top, is found always most in the common people, right? The common people. This is 100% anti-elitist, right? Anti-aristocratic, and you'll see anti-intellectual, anti-academic. Whitman barely went to school. Okay? You know, most kids left school by 6th grade at this time. Okay? The common people, the roughs, and keep that line in mind. The roughs. I'm just giving you more quotes. Here is one near the top, about 6 lines down. Oh, wait a second. Here are the, okay. There I pulled that line out of the roughs and beards. Okay. Later in the preface, Whitman has the line, there is that indescribable freshness and unconsciousness about an illiterate person that humbles and mocks the power of the noblest expressive genius. This is not on this slide. Okay, the power of the illiterate person. Okay, that person has something fresh, something unconsciously, imposing. Not subtle, no nuance about that figure. The illiterate. Emerson has a line in Self-Reliance where he talks about a scene where a bunch of people come into a room to see the infant, 18 months old. This little, barely a toddler. And Emerson says, what happens? All the people in the room start talking baby talk to the little infant. What does that mean? It means, Emerson always talks about genius. The genius in the room, the toddler. Why? Because infancy conforms to nobody. Okay? All conform to it. What is the measure of genius for Emerson? Not intelligence. The power to make other people imitate you. And a genius never imitates anyone else. Emerson has a line, imitation is suicide, right? Self-reliance, non-conformity, right? A different measure, right, of again, genius. Okay, you turn the page and you hit, well, the preface goes on and on. You turn the page and you finally hit some lines of verse. This is the first page of the verse proper. You notice again, no title, right? Nothing. Later, titles were added, section numbers were added, line numbers were added, and Whitman actually, thank you. Whitman actually added a lot. He revised the poem again and again, about 6 times, each time for the worse. Okay, the original versions are mostly better than the later versions of the poems. But look at this. See the first line where he says, Of arms and the man I sing, right? Aeneas, right? Leading out of Troy. No. I sing the wrath of Achilles. Okay? I mean, invoke the muse to celebrate this great heroic epic hero. No, this is America. Okay? I celebrate myself. Okay? I'm me. I'm the hero of, if there's any poem that reaches epic dimensions in American literary history, it's Song of Myself. Okay? It is this one. This is a world-class masterpiece. Whitman changed the course of English as well as American poetry forever with this, right? And you can see free verse. Why? I don't write sonnets. That's for them. Okay? My words do not accord with any pre-existing convention or form. Okay? The form emerges out of my spontaneous emotions. Every authentic form of poetic expression ought to be unique to me, right? Whoever the speaker happens to be. So you get, again, this is Whitman's free verse, which again changed everything. Uneven lines, no regular stanza form, although there's a lot of rhythm and sound. You see the opening, I sell myself, right? That line. I loaf my soul, right? I lean my ease. A great deal of internal rhythm, alliteration, assonance, and so on. Okay? Housing rooms are full of perfumes. Okay? I mean, Whitman, one Donald Hall, the poet, once said, it's not that Whitman had a great ear, he had a great tongue, right? It's oracular. It's not formal in that way. Look at this last line. The song of me, rising from the bed and meeting the sun. That's what this is about. And so the question would be, right? You've got this new epic, this new common hero, and you think, who is this figure? And let me jump ahead. See the top there? The first time Whitman is named as the author formally in the poem is this section. You see the third line. Walt Whitman, an American. And there you get again, one of the roughs, right? One of the roughs. A cosmos, okay? Oh, and if you want to have the illiteracy, look down. I speak the password primeval. I give the sign, like silent, I give the sign of democracy, right? Here, look at the bottom. Well, actually, look at the top. More celebration of the common figure. The butcher boy puts off his killing clothes or sharpens his knife at the stall in the market. I loiter, enjoy his repartee and his shuffle and breakdown. Blacksmiths, right? The Negro, the slave. You've got prostitutes in the poem. But look down. See there, the two lines. Oxen that rattle the yoke or halt in the shade. What is it that you express in your eyes? It seems to me more than all the print I have read in my life, right? Whitman used to like to ride the buses up and down Broadway or get on Brooklyn Ferry and go back and forth all day and just look at the faces of people passing by. Have some kind of eye contact for a moment. He was very big on physiognomy and the science of phrenology at this time as the science where one could read character in the face, right? In the body. There. Okay. I'll speed up here. Okay. Whitman, I just wanted to take this one. Whitman, for a time, would go to see sermons by a figure named Father Edward Thompson Taylor. Okay? He's the model for Father Mapple in Moby Dick. And here's what Whitman says about him. He was the essentially perfect orator. Just jump down to the third sentence in this middle paragraph. For when Father Taylor preached or prayed, the rhetoric and art, the mere words, which is seemed altogether to disappear, and the live feeling advanced upon you and seized you with a power before unknown, right? Some kind of magnetic pull, not the meaning of the words, but some kind of energy. I mean, Emerson believed in animal magnetism. He believed in mesmerism, where one could affect others on this sort of subverbal emotional level. We don't need all those fancy words. We don't need fancy arguments. No, we impress one another. A great figure like the Whitmanian poet is able to seize people. And Whitman italicizes live feeling right there. That's the great effect for the Whitman poem. So yeah, one of the roughs, a Cosmos, final, and so one final clip, and then we'll have some questions. This is later in the film, Easy Rider, just before a group of guys attack them and kill Jack Nicholson, in fact. But can we play the video? Can we play that? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, this used to be a hell of a good country. I can't understand what's going on with it.
Man, everybody got chicken, that's what happened. Hey, we can't even get into like a second-rate hotel. I mean, a second-rate motel, you dig? They think we're gonna cut their throat or something, man. Like, they're scared, man.
Oh, they're not scared of you. They're scared of what you represent to them.
Hey, man. All we represent to them, man, is somebody who needs a haircut.
Oh, no. What you represent to them is freedom.
What the hell's wrong with freedom, man? That's what it's all about.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's what it's all about, all right. But talking about it and being it, that's two different things. I mean, it's real hard to be free when you are bought and sold in the marketplace. Of course, don't ever tell anybody that they're not free, because then they're going to get real busy killing and maiming to prove to you that they are. Oh, yeah, they're going to talk to you and talk to you and talk to you about individual freedom. But they see a free individual, it's going to scare them.
No, well, don't make them running scared.
No, it makes them dangerous.
Okay. Thanks.
Swamp.
Okay, so it's what you represent. What's that? We just represent a haircut. No, what you represent is freedom. Now, the point is, the big point is that this is the countercultural, right? The borderline figure, the one who challenges the conventions, who runs away from civilized society. This is a thread in American history, in the American character. And I think it should be, again, brought into the curriculum of the civics, because these people challenge a lot of the civic principles that one has, right? The coherence, the regularity of any society. You know, one of the problems with the counterculture in the 60s is it won, right? The counterculture might have played, as bohemianism did in the 19th century, might have played a healthy gadfly role in bourgeois society, as long as it doesn't win. Okay? If it's a minority condition, that can be a good thing. And it shouldn't be entirely stamped out. But once it wins, one, it becomes boring, stale, And also, it's more dangerous than bourgeois society ever was to any dissenters on the out. So I'll stop there. We've got 15 minutes for questions, I think. Okay. So,
Thank you so much. I'm going to speak as a Platonist for a moment, which is one of the great advantages of art, visual art, and music, is it can act on us prior to reflection and immediately. It can give rise to reflection.
what makes it dangerous?
Yeah. What makes it dangerous is it acts on us prior to reflection, and it could give rise to, thoughts without reflection. So, my general thought is, in this lecture you did a version of this. You used images and then you spoke around them to give some context. In the first image you showed, you said that image would be a good basis for debate, right? Because people would see different things. And I was wondering about how to responsibly, what other apparatuses of pedagogy could one have besides just confronting images or films and conversation, like other texts or ways to have it engage with the more reflective, to give rise to responsible reflection. How does one manage that?
I think one very important thing to do is to engage in the aesthetic analysis of form, not moral analysis, but the aesthetic commentary, noting things, like about the George Washington painting. What is the composition? How is color? What is the posture of the figures? What are people doing? What is the perspective that is taking place? And that actually it doesn't cancel the irrational effect, but it does blunt it a bit. Teaching students to examine form, aesthetic, artistic, craft, technique is a way of, it sort of demystifies the experience a little bit. Maybe for some that would be a loss, but we're in a classroom, and so what we want is to train, the critical examination of these things. And I think that when you present students with artistic materials that can have irrational response, that can be good or bad, they've got to get past that, right? A lot of art, a lot of great art has immoral elements in it, as everyone knows, right? D.W. Griffith's film Birth of a Nation is a cinematic masterpiece with a bad message. The nation heralded is the birth of the Ku Klux Klan in that movie. A year later, Griffith did another masterpiece called Intolerance that actually had the opposite message of Birth of a Nation. But learning to watch these things whose immorality disgusts you, this is part of growing up in a free society, right? So I think that we just have to accept the irrationality, the irrational element, the irrational experience of these things, but that's my response. The examination of technique, training the eye and the ear to see and hear things disinterestedly. We're going to be good Kantians about that. Yes?
So I wanted to pick up maybe on the end. I think you're right. There's this unruly American character, that there's this constant Huck Finn type that doesn't want to be educated or civilized, but there's also the gentleman type at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, for civic education, how do we balance between the rebellious side of the American life, but also more the refined gentleman, and especially on the rebellious side, that seems harder to teach, the side that doesn't want to be educated.
Right.
How do we teach that and cultivate that in students?
What are we supposed to do with these major American figures who were forthrightly anti-intellectual, right? Who say, don't go to college. Emerson made fun of people going to college, professors, And so there is there, Richard Hofstadter wrote this book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. I don't like that book, but he did find a theme in there because all the anti-intellectuals are conservative in his take on things. But the paranoid style essay, JFK liberalism, that was what was going on there. But it's a problem. It doesn't go away. I don't think the problem can be resolved. Look, do you want your kids to act like the Easy Rider guys? We don't want them to end up this way. Actually, they all end up dead in the film. But I think that, again, the recognition of there's something a little rough and tumble in American history that may, at times, have a sanative value, all right? Maybe you won't think this, I think Donald Trump has had a very good effect on both political parties in this regard. He has, Rusty Reno, my editor-in-chief, he says, Donald Trump is the great enema of American politics. That's how he puts it. He has exposed things, he's brought things out, right, that needed to be exposed. Okay? Whatever you think of Trump, the reality of a lot of the establishment parts of the parties have been shown to be utterly corrupt, self-serving, So in that case, I would put the Trump phenomenon in this lineage. When Hulk Hogan, and Kid Rock, it is this, that there is a background that Trump, the populist side, that Trump is tapping into, and it's a challenge for Democrats because liberals loved the counterculture, right? They lionized Abby Hoffman, right? The youth movement, Tom Hayden, and all of them. Liberals embraced all of that, and why it's hard for them to disengage from the hard left today. But I don't have a good answer. There's no resolution to this. This is our tragic condition. So have fun with it. Okay? Yes.
Thank you. My question actually follows nicely. I'm over here on your left. My question follows nicely on this, which is, there's also, I was thinking about the distinction that Locke draws between liberty and license, and that also seems to be a tension running through through a lot of American political, like just thought, right? So the free rider, like the scene you showed, seems in some ways to exemplify a spirit of freedom as licentiousness. You can do whatever you want, and they hate you for being able to do whatever you want. Whereas then for Locke, of course, and for a lot of the founders, and for Lincoln, for a lot of great thinkers in American political tradition, there's freedom doesn't mean just doing whatever you want. It means being able to do the right thing, and it means recognizing that there is under you a moral code. So how does this tension balance out in the way we can think about it? Because it's for me personally, I sometimes struggle trying to articulate what it means to be free, and what it means to have political liberty as a people, and those sorts of questions. So
one thing about this again, renegade undercurrent is I don't think they get very far beyond leave me the hell alone. Okay, don't tread on me, but even more individualized. Okay, you just stay out of my damn business. Okay, get off my back. Okay, I can't stand all of this. I'm out of here. I actually don't think it goes into a reflection on any kind of, certainly any moral reflection on this. This is why we can't let this element get too powerful, as it has, right, in American life. Okay? The idea of anyone saying, talking about license to them, they would just ignore that. They say, I want to do my own thing. And you do your thing, Just they're millions. Don't bother me and I won't bother you. They actually don't realize your behavior is destructive to everybody else. You don't exist alone. You think you do, you act like you do, but you don't. Okay? You have influence, you have an impact, you mingle. You know, you go back and forth in society. Don't pretend like you're a complete, free, independent individual. You're not. None of us are. But that's their position. Liberty and license, same thing for them.
Well, maybe to put a finer point on this, are there examples of good art that celebrates institutionalists? So I'm thinking, I actually wonder if Washington himself would have liked the Lutz painting, or if he would have preferred the image that Trumbull painted of him handing over his commission. Or is that just not possible? Is it not possible to create good art that celebrates institutionalism? I also, when I was trying to come up with examples for myself, I think of the movie Glory and the ending scene when Matthew Broderick is being tossed into the sandpit along with the fellow soldiers of the 54th. For me, that's very moving. So I don't. Do you have examples?
You know, the last battle image when he's dead, Denzel Washington is dead, and his second in command is leading guys along the ramparts. And what happens is they come upon Confederates who've just erected a cannon, probably filled with shrapnel, and it freezes, and then they all go like this and freeze again. That's not realism, right? That is monumentalism. It's like the freeze of Shaw and the regiment. It's highly artificial, it's highly artistic, and it's perfect. It's a very good way because that's the Civil War. That's good art. So and it's noble, right? It is a noble moment there. In the face of death, we stay with it. So, yeah, there are a lot of very good, moral works of art, but the morality is not what makes them great works of art. This, again, is a permanent problem with the aesthetic, going all the way back to Plato's Republic, right? Aristotle tried to solve it. He did, in a way, with the catharsis issue. But it's the constant challenge of great art and immoral. Very easy. Great artists can influence. Gulliver's Travels, Book 4, is one of the monuments, right, of English literature, and it's got a really dark message. Okay, people are disgusting. Okay, human beings are repulsive. That's Swift's misanthropy at work. But we have to read it, right? Yes. Yeah.
Just 1 minute.
Okay. You've made a very compelling case for what is American about this poetics. But my mind, as a Miltonist, I think of Milton's Satan as a rebel without a cause who's very boring in power, or Romantics later on. And so I would invite you to think about, are there European traditions of poetry or aesthetics?
Bad Boys.
So how would this
Prometheus?
How would this American story you are telling connect to antecedents or parallels on the continent?
Yeah. Is Satan one of the all-time great characters in all of Western literature? He's mesmerizing, right? He has psychological depth that I don't think one had ever seen before in an evil kind of figure. And Satan draws you in. The Stanley Fish thesis, you're being seduced too by Satan. The reader is recognizing his own sin. That's why Surprised by Sin, as the title of Fish's book on Paradise Lost. And it is Milton being very sophisticated in working on in working on our fallen condition. I'm not sure if that flies, really. You know, maybe Blake said, nah, Milton was really of Satan's party. He just didn't know it, right? He liked Satan, as we all do. Satan's interesting, God is boring in Paradise Lost. That's what Blake says. But it's certainly the romantic hero, the Byronic hero, edgy, right? A little bit, beyond the bounds. Bourgeois society is not for Lord Byron. And Byron was just about the most famous man in Europe after Napoleon, okay? Super celebrity because he's the bad boy, right? And so, certainly there are traditions that one can find and they all read, of course, everyone, Whitman read Paradise Lost and Emerson, of course. They all got that. So good, yes. Okay.
Time for lunch, half hour.
One more
Snacks again?
question? One more question?
What do we say, Lee? Sure, okay. Lee says it's okay. But you got to eat more quickly now. So, but this really will be it.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask about nonchalance, which in itself is a tone, an attitude, a carriage. I mean, so something that could be expressed in like the tilt of a hat. But it seems to me that in the way that Whitman represents it, like there's another tonal element in tension with the original tone of nonchalance, like the nonchalance that the soul loves. There's maybe something monumental, or anyway. I wonder if you could talk about what happens to nonchalance when it's abstracted, idealized like that.
I think for him, nonchalance means a certain ease with oneself and the world around. I'm not going to worry about things. Everything is right. Everything is in its place. He says at the end of Song of Myself, oh, my friends, do you not see? It is form and union and plan. It is happiness. Okay? And he leaves the reader, says, what does he put it? If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. No, I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow with the grass I love. If you want me again, look me under your boot soles. Missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere waiting for you. Begins with I, it ends with you. In Song of Myself, we're all at rest, right? We're calm. I mean, there are psychological issues with Whitman. Totally dysfunctional family that he grew up with, and he idolized his mother because she said she was such a great figure of quiet piety. She was illiterate, but she was someone who just had this piety that put her at peace with the world. I think nonchalance is sort of Whitman's middle-aged male version of that. So thanks. All right.